Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of YOURE video. Now, Sonic Forces is a very interesting game in the Sonic series, as it's possibly one of the most mid games in the franchise. Some would even call the game bad. Sonic Forces has many issues, and the disappointment after the hype the game caused still leaves a bad taste in many people's mouths. But the history of Sonic Forces is not what this video is about. It's about the game's bosses. While I do have a bit of a soft spot for Forces, it's definitely still a pretty mid game that, while it has its moments, had so much potential to be better. The same applies for the bosses here. Most of them are just whatever, not the most fun to fight. But with this in mind, I figured it would be interesting to rank the bosses to see which ones are slightly better compared to the others. And I also wanted to give this game one last hurrah for me personally, as I've recently platinumed the game on PS4, and after this, I essentially have no reason to go back to the game other than briefly revisiting it once a year for nostalgia, I guess. I figured making this video would be a good occasion to do just that. This ranking will be based off how challenging the bosses are, how fun they are to fight, and how interesting their mechanics are. And of course, this is all just my opinion, these aren't objective for the most part. Now, I don't think I have much else to say for this intro, so with that, we'll just get into the ranking and see which boss is the worst in Sonic Forces. 7. Dr. Eggman. All in my time of playing video games, I've faced worse bosses than this. The first Eggman fight in Forces sucks. I'll just say it. It's not a good boss fight. I also find it ironic that how you have to play as Classic Sonic, known as the worst character to play as in Sonic Forces, which I agree with, for this boss, and is the only boss you actually fight as outside the first phase of the final boss, which is kind of sad. But hey, maybe that's a good thing considering, like I mentioned, Classic Sonic's the worst character in the game. Anyways, onto the boss itself. Its first phase is the 5th bajillion refight of the Eggman from Sonic 1, but now it's a bust outside of a wrecking ball, real original Sega. But yeah, you defeat him really easily, and then you get into the main meat of the boss fight, where you have to fight against the Egg Dragon. It was a cool boss with Sonic Unleashed, but it's the third time this boss has been used in the mainline Sonic games. At least for generations, and a good reason to come back, since that was the whole point of the game, was to relive Sonic's past. But here it's just a boss for no reason. I don't know why Sega didn't just make a new robot for this fight. Because they were just lazy, I suppose. The boss's attacks are pretty simple. Eggman shoots drills and this Gatling gun from his arm, which are really easy to avoid as long as you're paying attention. There's also this one attack where Eggman throws around ground chunks at Classic Sonic, and the attack can get really fast without the fight. It even still isn't super hard to avoid. And during this attack, sometimes these big black balls seem to be made of this like rock hard material, and also land on the ground where Classic Sonic is. And you have to send the black rock ball things back at the Egg Dragon. With the projectiles you send back at Eggman, don't walk onto him, so you can't be reckless like I was in this footage and fire back the rock ball things as fast as possible. You have to take your time. Line up your shots still hit Eggman. It starts to actually be able to put some effort into pushing damage from the boss, but then the fight is over pretty quickly, as you can easily defeat the boss in under 2 minutes, which is kind of pathetic for a boss midway into the game. I will say the only shining positive I can give the boss is that I really like the dialogue during the boss fight. I personally think it's one of the moments of Forces that has more good writing than usual. This interaction in particular is actually pretty funny.
You've got a lot of nerve for a bite-sized Sonic from another dimension. Still, this Egg Dragoon has only lost 10% of its combat strength.
You're lying!
You won't have to wait long to find out.
But even the good dialogue can't save this boss. Definitely the weakest boss in the game due to its low difficulty basic attacks and mid-attack patterns. Or not the most fun to fight, I'll say that much. 6. Zavok. While I will cut a little slack for the Zavok boss, as it's only the first boss you encounter in Forces, it's still not that good of a boss fight. First off, why is Zavok in this giant crossbeat insect thing? It feels kind of random for Zavok, and it feels weird to not fight him directly in more close range combat outside of the very end of the boss, which is just essentially a cutscene. Maybe I missed something in Lost World, I don't know, I have yet to play that game, but I highly doubt it explains why Zavok is running a giant bug. Anyways, as the first boss is pretty simple, you start the fight, and Zavok attacks you with lasers and buzz bombers. The lasers are extremely easy to dodge, and so is the attack where a bunch of buzz bombers try to dive on you. Ironically enough, the attack where only 3 buzz bombs spawn is the hardest attack, as it's annoying to get all of them to do the homing attack being pretty clunky this close range. Even your basic spin jump is pretty clunky here as well. And after all that, Zavok will use his B to slam to the ground. All will follow you, so you have to make sure Zavok doesn't squish you. And then, the thud of Zavok's B sends you into the air, allowing you to homing attack him to deplete his health. But you have to be far enough away from him in order for the homing attack icon to pop up. If you're too close to Zavok, it'll essentially be impossible to hit him. But when replaying this boss for the first time in forever, it was pretty confusing. I thought the game had soft lock or glitched for a second there. I like this mechanic of needing to get extra far away from Zavok's B in order to hit Zavok. It's definitely pretty confusing at first. And after you hit Zappa enough, the second phase starts, which makes the boss arena smaller, and Zappa replaces the attack with this move, where his V charges through the arena. And I will say, it's definitely tougher to avoid than the lasers. And while the difficulty ramp up is nice, it still doesn't do enough to save the boss. It's still pretty easy, and after another couple of hits, the Zappa's done. There's this in-game cutscene of Sonic doing this cool sort of boxing fight with Zabak and fight. Like, imagine it was only a cutscene. I wish you could actually control this or a real quick fight, even if there would just be some QTEs. But overall, this fight is not that great, and leaves much to be desired. Well, it's okay, I guess, for a starter boss, and it had potential to be so much better. But hey, at least it's a bit more fun to fight than the first Icon fight. 5. Infinite. Mystic Jungle. This boss is whatever. So in the first of the 3 Infinite fights, yes, there's 3 of them, you're chasing Infinite on this giant snake, and you have to boost enough in order to catch up to him, while avoiding these red bar things that are made by the Infinite via the Phantom Ruby. That's essentially the whole boss fight. While it does get harder over time with the bars getting harder to avoid, it still has the same basic gameplay loop for the entire boss. While the boss seems pretty easy, and it can be, it ends up being kind of tough, but more in an annoying way. This is mainly due to the kind of clunky controls that Forces usually has. When tricking with Sonic, here, it can be kind of hard to dodge the more advanced red bars later in the boss, which is pretty frustrating. Top that off with the fact that I hadn't played this fight in a while, which meant I was pretty rusty overall. And it led to me taking longer to beat Infinite than I should have had. And I was struggling a little bit. Another part that also didn't help was that even just hitting him, it can be pretty tricky. Sometimes when Sonic should be homing attack range, the rectile for that never pops up. There was also this one point where I was mid-homing attack, but I was at the end of the boss arena loop, and right in the middle of the homing attack, I got put into the cutscene that transitions from the end of the loop to the beginning of the loop. I had to chase Infinite all over again, not getting hit, which kind of sucked to say the least. And I might as well mention this now since I'm on top of it, but a minor annoyance I have with the boss is that no matter how close you are to Infinite in that fight, the cutscene always sends you back to square one when it comes to the distance between you and Infinite, which, as I said, is a minor annoyance. And the basic attacks don't help make this process fun, as the only other moves Infinite has here besides the red bars is you have to jump and dodge these break cues that focus in on you, and you have to jump at the right time before the attack. As well as this attack at the midway and end of the boss where Infinite closes himself a lot, you have to hit the real one. And while it looks really cool, it mainly just boils down to tapping X on the controller a lot until you get to the real Infinite and homing attack. What sucks is that there are exclusive attacks you need to avoid if you get into a Phantom Ruby illusion by touching one of the red bars. These attacks are actually somewhat easy and kind of fun to deal with. And since you'll be on 0 rings, it makes things a lot more intense. But since you'll need to touch the red bars in order to activate these, which the whole point is to dodge them, you won't be encountering these too much. Those attacks have just been part of Infinite's core moveset. I will admit though, the best part about this boss is that outside the final boss, the boss definitely has the most sauce to it. The intro and outro of the boss are pretty cool. The fact that you're running on a snake makes for a pretty awesome set piece. Everything in the boss arena should have had you go infinitely instead of on a loop, as Infinite could have used the Phantom Ruby illusions to make the boss arena this way, and could have added uncanny and tricky fire to the fights. Plus, his name is Infinite. Going on a path infinitely, like come on, man. Also, in the backdrop is pretty cool with Mystic Jungle on fire in the background. And it makes for some great and cool scenery. Some final positives before I get into my thoughts that while not the best attack, even its clone attack vision does look pretty awesome. The music for this fight is definitely one of the better music tracks in the game. Even with its sauce and other minor positives, the boss fight still sucks and is the most forgettable boss in the game, even with its sauce. The gameplay is boring and not fun, and definitely had potential to be at least a decent fight, but I fell short. The only reason why it's not closer to the bottom of the list is because now we're getting to the bosses where you actually kind of have to try in order to beat the boss efficiently. Also, I forgot to add this part into the script, but I noticed that like when I was replaying this boss, I noticed somehow younger me got an S rank on this boss with like a time of 1 minute and 16 seconds. Generally, I have no idea how I did that. So I guess if you really master the boss, then it just becomes like, so yeah, if you struggle with the boss, obviously it's not fun, but I guarantee if you probably like master the boss and figure out the way to like beat it really quickly, it also becomes not that fulfilling. Man, you should not take it like a little over a minute to beat a boss. Come on. That shocked me when I first saw that. Yeah, I forgot to mention that in the script. Anyways, I'm now actually on to number 4. 4. Metal Sonic. This is definitely one of the most disappointing boss fights in the game. As all the other boss fights in this game so far, is barely above the previous ones in the list. That sucks because this is Metal Sonic we're talking about. Arguably one of the most coolest and interesting villains. Hell, even different characters in the Sonic universe. And he gets a lame-ass boss where it feels like him as a character is barely utilized. It's not even the real Metal Sonic. Just an illusion of Phantom Ruby. While this is fine with Zabak, it made sense for him to be an illusion. And they even gave a canon reason as to why the real Metal Sonic wasn't using forces in the IDW comics. And the reason makes sense, but it's never explained in the main game, so most probably won't know about this. And this all takes a bit of novelty out of the fight. Another thing about the boss is that it feels like the least treated like a boss in this game. It makes me feel bad for Metal Sonic at this point. Instead of being called Personnel Sonic with real bosses, it's just Redgate Bridge, which is more like a level game, and even has the usual level collectibles to get. which kind of makes it unique compared to other bosses which don't have collectibles. Maybe makes it feel more like a normal stage. The only reason why I think this might be the case is the fact that the level has a brief non-boss segment before the fight starts. Even if that's the case, there's a really dumb reason to just not call it versus Metal Sonic. But yeah, I just want to mention those things. Now let's talk about the boss game, which is really underwhelming. So simply all you do in the boss is 3 things. 1. Avoid these laser things on Metal Sonic projects, which aren't too bad to avoid. 2. You avoid the desire when Metal Sonic rushes at you and leaves an electric trail in his wake. And 3. Homing attack enemies to get boost energy from them to boost to catch up with Metal Sonic and spamming the homing attack button and even more. Then you end it off with this kind of cool, I guess, double boost section, and then rinse and repeat for the entire boss fight. How fun. Maybe this would be more excusable if this were the first boss or something, but this boss takes place about 2/3 of the way through the game. It should not be this basic easy. Even the collectibles aren't that fun to get. For Metal Sonic's laser tag, you just have to size it properly in the right places to get the wind rings, the number rings. But for the Silver Moon race, since Metal Sonic normally only uses laser tag twice, you need to purposefully weigh out the boss and not hit Metal Sonic in order to get the Silver Moon rings. Well, that's bad game design, and why other bosses don't have the ring collectibles in the first place. The only reason why this boss is come up on the list is that you have to put an effort to catch up with Metal Sonic and avoid his attacks, even though it's easy, you still have to try in order to succeed. Research this boss also absolutely slaps. It's probably one of the best OSTs in the game. Shame such a good song was used for a boss like this. And then the main reason why this boss is on the floor is because it's actually a decent time to go for the S rank. Not a fun time necessarily, but a solid time. For some reason, the S rank requirements here are really strict, so you really have to learn the boss almost perfectly run, which can be satisfying to do. And so for that, I have to give it some extra points. But overall, this fight is just so good. There's a decent foundation here, but I feel like half the boss is missing. This is way too basic and easy for bosses in the second half of the game. 3. Infinite, Eggman's Empire Fortress. This is the third and final Infinite fight, being the penultimate boss for Sonic Forces. And to be honest, this boss is disappointing, if not more so than the Metal Sonic fight. The main reason why this is the case is because the fight is essentially a clone of the Metal Sonic fight in Forces. Like, come on, seriously? Like, Metal Sonic, Infinite has 3 basic attacks, with 2 of them being directly ripped from the Metal Sonic fight, with the whole match and the only attack segment of damage him, the part where he rushes at you and leaves electricity in his wake. His only original attack is the part where he summons these rotating phantom ruby illusion spinners and you gotta dodge them at the right time. While this attack is just okay, I prefer it over the laser one from the Metal Sonic fight, as it's a bit more challenging, even if the general gameplay of the attack is just your size thing. There's also a secret attack you have to go up against if you get hit by the spinners, or jump over and dodge these lasers, which is definitely Infinite's best attack in the fight. But like them fighting Mr. Jungle, it should have been part of his core moveset, and it's not worth it to go through this attack when it bogs the pace of the boss and makes it take longer to defeat him. But yeah, this boss is not good, and the fact that he's on the list is sad. The boss still has a few positives towards it, however, like this time, the boss has no collectible rings to go for, which is fine considering how the previous boss handled those. The cutscene midway through the boss that switches the boss from just playing Sonic to Sonic Avatar is pretty neat, although I wish the second half of the boss was more aggressive than the first half. The same also goes for Metal Sonic here. The music and setting where the boss takes place are also pretty decent too. One final positive is that while it's not super hard to S-rank the boss, there's a super strict time limit for the timer challenge where you have to beat the boss at a certain time. That was pretty decent to tackle, as you really do need you to perfect your run for this challenge. That's all I really have to say about the third Infinite fight. It's probably the least I have to say about any boss, since the majority of it's just a Metal Sonic fight again, which is really confusing. The Sonic can do this, and it makes Infinite, who's already an underwhelming character, and off on a whimper. I was tempted to swap this with Metal Sonic fight since this fight is mostly a copy of it, but its new attacks are better than the one replaced, and has a couple more positives compared to the Metal Sonic fight, so it's at number 3 on the list. 2. Infinite Metropolis. We are now starting to get to the point where the bosses are starting to get pretty decent and actually feel competent. And yes, I'm aware this is number 2 on the list, and we're just getting to this point. While I wouldn't call this boss good per se, it's still a solid fight overall. To start off, I will say that, like Infinite's boss theme here, insanely catchy, another one of the best music tracks in Forces for sure. The way how the song flows and the instrument is used are all great. Now this boss does start off on the weaker side, as the first phase of the fight isn't too crazy. All you really have to do is avoid these phantom ruby illusion wisps, and Infinite will try to dive at you. The wisps are a bit tricky to avoid, but are very manageable to do so. And the other standard attack is that Infinite will dive at you, and if you avoid his attack, you have the chance to attack Infinite and deplete his health bar. We'll say that before I talk about the second phase, that while you can't attack Infinite by only attacking him, you can deplete Infinite's health bar faster if you use a Wisp Bomb, mainly one of the spammier / better ones like Burst and Hunger. Any Wisp Bomb can do the trick, like the drill shown here, but it's definitely one of the worst examples of using a Wisp Bomb to attack Infinite. While it's more optimal to do this, especially for an S rank, I'd say for a more enjoyable experience, I would recommend just homing attacking the bosses. Even though it takes a bit longer to beat them, it forces you to lock in more and has a greater sense of challenge, plus it doesn't bog the pace down. Speaking of a greater sense of challenge, the second phase of the Infinite fight picks up and almost makes up for the very weak first phase. You still need to attack Infinite when he dives towards you, but the game makes it a lot harder to properly do that. To start, there are now 2 Phantom Ruby illusion wisps that follow you around instead of just 1, and it was already somewhat tricky to avoid it, so having more follow you makes it harder. And there's also a new attack where Phantom Ruby cubes are present on the ground, and you have to move out of the area where they are, or else you get blasted by them and get hit, and it can be pretty tricky to dodge the attack too. And on top of that, basic enemies will spawn in, which might not seem like much, but a decent amount do so, and it can be pretty easy to be hit by the enemies if you're not careful, and they can easily get in your way. All this leads to a lot to deal with, and it's more easier to get hit by the Phantom Ruby based attacks, which leads to more attacks that you can only see when being hit by the Phantom Ruby, like the other Infinite fights. One of them is similar to the cube area attack, but with these cool looking cannon things and a bit of a different pattern. And the other attack is that a ton of turrets spawn on the ground and the ceiling, and you have to avoid the cannonballs that come out of them, which is easily the hardest attack to face in this boss. It's very tough to avoid the cannonballs due to their small and fast nature, but maybe it's a bit too tough to the point of frustration. But luckily you can get rings pretty easily in this fight, which while helpful, especially against this attack, and at the same time maybe the ring regeneration is a bit too generous, but after enough time you can easily take down Infinite after a couple of tries. I will also know that it's definitely hard to attack Infinite with Wisp Bomb practically during this boss, as while it's definitely possible to get the rest of his remaining health in one attack, even with Burster. However, with all this stuff going on in the battleground, it's harder to get the timing down for this, which is good to see. Overall, the second Infinite fight has still some issues like a weak first phase and some other annoyances. It's actually a pretty decent boss. It's enjoyable to fight and easily the best out of the 3 Infinite fights in Forces, even if it still had some potential to be a lot better. Solid fight all around, but if you've been keeping track of the bosses of this video, you probably know what number 1 on this list is. 1. Death Egg Robot. Okay, yeah, I feel like this is objectively the best boss in Forces, right? At least that's what it seems like. The final boss in Forces is pretty good overall, and it's nice to see that Forces does enough strong, as it's a pretty mid, like I mentioned before. While far from perfect, this boss is easily the best in the game, and let me explain why. Okay, well, after I talk about the first phase. Because this first phase is one of the worst parts about this boss, is because, man, it sucks. Well, on the first time playing it, it might not be so bad, but man, once you know what you're doing, it's batshit easy. Okay, so remember how in the first Eggman fight, you had to throw these black rocks back at Eggman in order to damage him? Well, it's back here, but now it's even easier to do that, as you can now rebend the black rock back at him and deal more damage. And you can even do this with more than one rock. Like, come on, seriously? The other attacks are also pitiful, as this laser you can easily jump over, and the ground below you just slowly disappears behind you, and Reaper's in front of you. So yeah, off to a bad start. This first phase sucks. But the fight picks up immensely in the second phase, though, where he plays the Avatar. Okay, so you see, you are on this ground made up of hexagon tiles. Hexagon? Fall Guy! Okay, so, anyways, I'll try to lock in now. Made by hexagon tiles. The same one from the Zabek boss, actually, which I didn't realize until just now as I'm writing the script. But anyways, yeah, you are on this ground and you have to avoid these rockets that the Death Egg Robot fires at you. Then his hand will smash down on the ground with shockwaves reverberating from it. You then need to attack the hand in order to complete the boss's health bar. While this main gameplay loop may seem very simple at first, there are 2 things that end up making this phase a lot better. The first thing is that while the main way to beat the boss is damage his hand, during the hand shockwave attack, you can also attack the robot's chest. This deals a lot more damage to the robot, but it's a lot harder to homing attack in the hand, so you have to make sure to attack the chest properly, or else it can be easy to fall off and you have to start the phase all over again. Plus, when the hand comes down, it follows your position before striking, so you have to be in the right position in order to have the chest exposed as much as possible, or else it'll be nearly impossible to hit. And it's highly recommended that you do this in order to ensure an S-work on the boss. And you essentially have to do this if you want to beat the timer challenge too. I'd say that this is a pretty cool mechanic for the boss, and it gets better with the second thing that makes this phase better, which is that as the fight goes on, it gets more harder. The robot starts to shoot more rockets, enemies will start to spawn in, and just like the boss I mentioned about earlier, the second Infinite fight, they get in your way and attack you if you don't deal with them quick enough. The robot's fist will also decimate the ground that you're standing on, and the laser will also decimate more of the ground too, and it focuses on you as well. All of this leads to a pretty challenging part of the fight that I struggled on a lot. Often when I was younger and beating the game for the first time. Even nowadays I can have some trouble with fighting this phase. And with these last 2 attacks I mentioned, making the ground disappear, it's now harder to attack the robot's chest and even easier to fall off. Overall, I'm still a bit shocked at this part of the boss holds as well as it did, and in my opinion, it's the best part about this boss. But then comes the third and final phase, which while a bit weaker compared to the second phase, is still pretty strong. Before I talk about the final phase, I want to say that the transition between the second and third phase is really cool and has an awesome aura to it. After you deplete the Death Egg Robot's health, it seems to shut down. The music gets all intense. With these choral vocals, the atmosphere is tense. You can hear some thumping coming from the Death Egg Robot. Closer shot then takes place as you see the thumping is coming from, or you can see the closer shot then takes place as you see where the thumping is coming from. It gets more intense. Then you see a bunch of tentacles bursting out of the lifeless husk of the Death Egg Robot. Then out comes this cool-looking squid-like robot that immediately takes modern plus classic Sonic as well as the Avatar to null space. for the final fight. Knuckles and Amy give some motivating words, and then the final phase begins. The transition is really well done, really cool. I also like when you hear the thumping, the PS4 controller vibrates in correspondence to the thumbs. It's pretty neat. But now, onto the final phase itself. While cool and still basic challenge, it feels kinda standard. I have my issues with the phase, but what I'll discuss, a lot of issues with the rest of the boss fight after I finish talking about the fight, as well as the rest of the positives. Anyway, okay, I'm so sorry. He plays all three of the playable characters at once as you try to deplete the Death Egg Robot's final form. You do this by getting boost capsules from these, I don't know what to call them, and you have to boost in order to get close enough to the robots. You do a triple homing attack on it until its health bar goes down. There are many hazards in your way that prevent you from getting close to hitting the boss, such as lasers you must jump over, drills that suddenly lock onto you, phantom ruby wisp things that constantly change patterns, and other attacks. It may seem a bit standard, and it's sort of true, but kind of accept for by being yet again pretty tough. It is a final boss after all, so it makes sense for it to be tough. But man, even now it's going to be a challenge to beat the boss. If you want to get an S rank or beat the time challenge for the boss, you really have to do an almost flawless run. And I'm going to know the boss well in order to do so. It is a good challenge, and considering the game usually lasts a good challenge, it's nice to see here. So yeah, overall the boss in the final phase isn't too shabby. Once you deplete the self fully, the robot then taken down, and then it's once again defeated, ending off Sonic Forces. But wait, even though most of the positive with the boss so far, I can confidently say that's the best in the game. But it still has its many issues, and it's far from perfect. I already mentioned how ass the first phase is. It really does suck, but the second and third phases have their quirks too. I guess I'll mention the second phase first. As while I do think this phase is the peak of the boss, my biggest gripe is that I feel like the session is missing something. I don't know, but I feel like the boss could use like one more attack or one more feature. I don't know. It also can be annoying and quite finicky to jump from platform to platform precisely, although that's more the fault of Force's physics and feel of control. And I also want to quickly mention that this phase's difficulty can veer towards the more annoying type of difficulty. But then there's the final phase, and while there isn't a ton of negatives necessarily, there is one very big issue that I have with this boss, and it's the fact that it's another rehash of the final boss fight from Sonic Colors. Like, come on, man. That's just lazy. And it's even lazier when it's the second time I've done this. It's a very similar gameplay loop to Colors in the Lost World final bosses, of rushing up to get close to Eggman's robot while avoiding the hazards and attacks along the way. And outside of like one new attack, practically all the attacks are the same from the boss in Colors, which became even more apparent after I actually played the final boss in Colors through the Ultimate re-release not so long ago. The crazy thing is that the Colors final boss feels a lot more grand and more like a final boss compared to Force's rehash, which, as I mentioned, does feel more like a standard boss, even when it clearly isn't. I mean, there are the other two phases, but still, the fact that the epic final segment is essentially a rehash, that sucks. I don't know how the boss from Sonic Lost World is, since I've never played or seen much footage of it, but yeah, it sucks to see. At least the first two phases are more original, and the final phase isn't a complete one-to-one with the Colors boss, and the boss has a couple of other issues too, though. Like the second phase, it has its moments where the difficulty of the final phase can be more towards the annoying side. Speaking of annoying, what irritates me a bit is that in order to get to the boost capsules you need to catch up to the Death Egg Robot, you gotta sidestep / ram into these things in order to refill on ranks and get some boost capsules. The issue is that on top of the boost capsule only spawning in the middle section of these things, and the fact that the timing is a bit tight if you aren't in the exact spot and you need to get one of these boost capsules, is that the motherfucking boost capsules bounce and have physics, and they have just enough bounce where you can even run under it. Yup, it gets annoying quickly considering it's hard to predict when the capsule will exactly bounce, and you can easily mess up an S-rank / time challenge run. And believe me, I know from experience. I also think that the way the boss ends with the triple boost is kinda lame, and it feels way less epic than it should be. No, it just leaves the boss on a bit of an underwhelming note. One final thing I want to say about the boss is that I just absolutely loathe its name. It's like a Death Egg Robot. Really? There's already plenty of iterations of this thing, so we don't need another. And it feels so isolated and different from the other Death Egg Robots to the point where it doesn't even feel like one. I guarantee that Sonic Team could come up with cooler and more original than this. Even something as simple as like the Phantom Ruby robot I vastly prefer over this. Could go into more detail on my thoughts on this boss, but I'll just end it here, bro. This script's already getting really long. I still really need to work on this video, man. It's been in the works for forever. But anyways, as I've already said, yeah, overall, while I'd say this is a good boss and a decent way to end off Forces, it's still held back from true greatness by many things, but mainly due to the laughably bad first phase and the fact that the final phase is more so a rehash than anything. Could have been amazing, and its potential is high, but the boss just ends up being pretty good, and nothing more than that. Wow, that was quite the trip. Well, but at least now I can say that I've ranked all the bosses in Sonic Forces, so that's something, I guess. You could probably tell this by now, but most of the Forces bosses kind of suck. Well, none of them are necessarily bad. They get close to that point, and have plenty of bad aspects to them. And out of the 7 bosses, only 2 of them are pretty good, and even still are definitely held back, and they're not that good. Which is truly a shame, because all of these bosses had potential to be great, but the bosses just never reached that true potential, even for the 2 bosses that actually were good. And I feel like this list of bosses is a reflection of Sonic Forces as a whole. Not necessarily bad, has its good moments, but it still kind of sucks and had a lot of potential to be great. But it just ends up falling flat, never reaching that potential. Which is something I realized as I was writing this video. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in the intro as well. But I still do have a soft spot for this game. It does get overhated at times, but it is not good at all. It's just underwhelming. And these bosses do not help its case at all. But yeah, that's all I have to say for this video. I did hope you enjoyed me ranking all these bosses. And if you did, like and subscribe. You don't have to, but just help the channel out. You can also check out some of my other ranking videos, or just other videos in general. And also make sure to check out my Twitter that I barely use. Links in the description. Yeah, see you on the next one, and take care. Bye.